Hello everyone and welcome to this video. I am so excited to be making this video where we are going to be walking through functional blood work. We're going to be looking at a case study of a 36-year-old woman, before and after. And I'm so excited to be making this because I can finally demonstrate to you guys how I use functional blood work in my practice, how useful it can be in pinpointing your unique root cause to your chronic illness. I've found that ever since I integrated functional blood work into my practice, it has served as an integral tool to look at when we're not really sure what's wrong, right? So many of my clients, including the client that we'll look at today, go to their doctors and they get a blood workup. But the doctor says, well, everything looks normal. I don't know what to tell you. But they don't feel normal, right? My client today was dealing with some horrible symptoms and issues, and we'll see that we actually uncovered quite a bit using functional ranges instead of the doctor's ranges. So one key point to clarify about functional blood work versus the blood work that you get at the doctor is that functional blood work is looking at optimal ranges, so they tend to be a lot narrower than the blood work at the doctor, which is only looking for if you're in a diseased state. So they're wider ranges. So in functional blood work, we really believe that there's this space between optimal, disease, and the space in between where maybe you're suboptimal and potentially at risk for sliding into the diseased state. Okay, so today I'm going to be sharing with you a before and after for a 36-year-old woman. It's going to be an abridged version. I don't want to go through all of the blood work that I use in my practice because that would be an hour or two long video, and I just want to give you an idea, a sample. Then I'm going to show you exactly what we did, the protocol that we used, and how her numbers changed in an incredible way to reflect all of the meaningful work that we had done. All right, so let's go ahead and jump in. All right, so this client was a 36-year-old woman. She had a history of Sjogren's, which is an autoimmune connective tissue disease. She came to me already eating super clean. She had been on the AIP diet for many years and was now eating kind of an abridged version of that, a paleo type of template. And she also had a lot of knowledge about clean living. She had very low toxin exposure in her life. So I right away could sort of rule out that the things that were irritating her were diet related, right? So she actually came to me after she got her jab in March of 2021. So prior to that point, she had actually done a great job managing her Sjogren's and all of her sort of autoimmune symptoms, just using diet and the lifestyle piece. And this is often, when people come to me, is when all of that stuff that works for a really long time and is super great and important, what I like to call the foundational pieces, just kind of stop working, and there's something deeper at play that we need to dig into. So after she got her jab, she was experiencing very stubborn symptoms that at times were debilitating. So she had numbness in her extremities, she had dizziness and lightheadedness, she was exhausted and had a lot of brain fog. So all of this was really kind of not allowing her to function in her life. She was afraid to drive because she was feeling so out of it, and it was not very predictable. So she really wanted to get a handle on the cognitive component of this. So I administer a signs and symptoms survey to all of my clients, and two of the symptoms that she reported, which were really important, were migrating joint pain and specifically joint pain in her breastbone. So those two things in particular really point me to Lyme. Those are hallmark symptoms of chronic Lyme disease. And we know that Lyme disease is so often misdiagnosed as autoimmunity. It is known as the great imitator because it imitates so many diseases so well. So right away, I'm sort of suspecting that we might be dealing with some kind of Lyme issue just based on signs and symptoms that she is reporting. We are going to look at her blood work from March of 2021, which was a few weeks after she got her jab and started experiencing these symptoms. And then we're going to look at it again in July of 2021, so about 5 months later, after we've done quite a bit of protocol. So let's dig in. Okay, so this is from March of 2021. It is a complete blood count with differential. So up at the top, we have white blood cells, which are basically, you can think about them like your body's military, right? They are your general defense system, and they actually have different arms that specialize in different things, just like the Navy, the Army, the Air Force. So your white blood cells are just your general military unit, your defense. So we see that her white blood cells are actually elevated. They're 8.6. We like to see them below 7.5 and above 5.5. So these are quite a bit elevated. And we also see below that the red blood cells are also elevated. They're at 4.96. So in females, we like to see red blood cells below 4.5. So what these two things together are telling me is that there has been an acute stress event, an injury, or else she is dealing with an acute infection, or potentially all three, right? So when do your military units start increasing drastically in number? When there's a threat. Okay, so she's got elevated white blood cells, elevated red blood cells. Something is making those multiply. What that thing is likely an infection. And I say that because of how her differentials are looking down here. So let's look at those. So her differentials are, again, her types of white blood cells. So if her white blood cells are like her military, then neutrophils are going to be like the Army. Lymphocytes are going to be like the Marines. And then there are a couple of other ones on the other side that we'll look at. So these are specializers, okay? So what we see is that her neutrophils are very, very high. So they actually report their differentials as the absolute number, but I prefer to look at them as a percentage. Most doctors' offices report them as percentages, so I just converted them here. But usually we want neutrophils to be below 60%, and these are at 82.6%. And that right away is going to tell us that there is an acute infection of some kind that is present. Those Army white blood cells are mobilizing and duplicating in number for a reason, right? And we also have this lymphocyte number down below, which is low. So lymphocytes should be at least 24, and hers are at 13.1%, so they are quite low. So taken together, high neutrophils with low lymphocytes, especially because a lot of her symptomology was so cohesive with a potential Lyme issue, I'm definitely thinking an acute bacterial infection at this point. All right, so then we have monocytes, which look good. We have basophils, which look good. We have granulocytes, which look good. And then we have eosinophils. So eosinophils are supposed to be below 3%, and these are our parasite markers. She is showing that she has 0.00, which is absolutely none. So while we want these guys to be below 3%, otherwise that may indicate a parasitic infection, if they are at absolute zero like this, it can often indicate that there's actually a biofilm problem in her body that is preventing the immune system from seeing any parasites at all. So in other words, her parasites are likely hiding in biofilm because there are zero being perceived at all in the immune system. So this is kind of a red flag to me. I suspect that this number would look quite different after we do some biofilm busting. If we were to run blood work again, we would probably see a different number here. So just because she has 0 as an eosinophil value, it does not mean that we don't need to think about parasites. So the big takeaway from her CBC is that she has an acute infection and that it is likely bacteria. All right, next we are looking at the basic metabolic panel that her doctor ran. I prefer to see a comprehensive metabolic panel, but since she already had her blood work drawn, I didn't make her go and get more. So when we're looking at her electrolytes, which can be indicators of stress or hydration, we see that her sodium and her potassium look really good, but her chloride is elevated. And this just means that her stress is likely incredibly high. It's a hyperadrenic state that she's in. And that is no surprise, right? It sounds like her body is really going through something with her infection and with this sort of post-jab state that she's in. So this makes complete sense. This could also be an emotional stress as well. But it's really important to understand that stress can show up in so many different ways and have so many different causes, and some of those are actually physiological causes. The next red flag that we see is her CO2 level, her carbon dioxide level, and we see that it is 23. We want it to be above 25. When it is low, it indicates that there is an excess acid amount in the body. And this is often a good corroborator for infection. So here's why. Most pathogenic bacteria, including the Lyme bacteria, produce metabolites. They poop out certain compounds. And one of the major compounds that they poop out is ammonia. And ammonia is an incredibly acidifying substance. It can really lower the pH in your body. So when we see low CO2, which is a more acidic body, then it's a big indicator to us that we may be dealing with some kind of infection where ammonia is being produced. All right, next we have glucose. She was non-fasting for this draw. So usually if you are fasting, we want it to be in the 70s and 80s. But because she was not fasting, I'm not super worried about that number. She also didn't come back with very many signs and symptoms in the blood sugar category. So not gonna worry about that. Creatinine looks good. Her BUN. Her BUN is a digestive marker, and it can often be low in people who don't get enough protein in their diet, people like vegans and vegetarians. And in that case, I would just simply have them add more protein into the diet. But this woman has low BUN, even though we know she's eating an AIP paleo type of diet, which is high in protein. So because we know she's getting plenty of protein, this low BUN number actually points to a lack of absorption and low digestive fire. So it could be because of low bile output, in which case it would be a liver stress. It could be a pancreatic stress if not enough enzymes are being produced. So this is something to keep our eye on, because she may not be absorbing very many of the nutrients that she's eating, even though she's eating super, super clean. Okay, so I see this a lot, especially with autoimmune people. All right, so she got a protein electrophoresis blood, which is a slightly different kind of panel than I typically see in the comprehensive metabolic panel, but all the values that we need to be looking at are the protein, which is in range, the albumin, which is in range, but then we see the globulin, which I actually added up all of these different kinds of globulin that they reported separately, but we really want the global number, the combined number. So when you add all of these different globulins up, it'll give you your total globulin, and she's at a 2.8, which is pretty high. It's right at the top of the range for what we want to see. And this is a great marker, globulin, for the gut and how impaired your gut lining is. And because it's high, we know her gut is really working hard to stay intact. So it's facing some kind of stress, Whether that's an infection, whether that's just a toxin exposure, we don't know, but it is very congruous with the rest of the story that we're seeing in the blood. All right, then we have the TSH marker. So, I get so irritated when I see this marker because so many people think that this is a thyroid marker, but it's actually not a thyroid marker. It's a thyroid stimulating hormone. It's the hormone that your body produces to stimulate thyroid hormone. The thyroid does not produce this hormone. And yet, this is the sole marker that most doctors will run to check your thyroid. It makes absolutely zero sense. I would have loved to see a complete thyroid panel for her, especially because her TSH is low. We want to see her TSH above 1.5. She's right around 1. So she has quite a lot of room for improvement with her thyroid. Now, that being said, a lot of people think that thyroid is a root cause of chronic illness, but that's actually not true. Thyroid is incredibly sensitive to root cause issues, things like metals, things like mold, things like infection. So if she is dealing with the acute infection that we suspect, then it's definitely no surprise that her thyroid is being a little bit sluggish right now. And this is also a really common thing that can happen post-jab when your immune system is down, when your metabolism is down, and your body is focused on sort of recovering from that stress event. So this is something that I definitely want to watch with her, but I also suspect that when we address her root cause, that this is going to normalize, and so I don't think that any specific thyroid-oriented therapy is merited by this. Okay, next we have erythrocyte sedimentation rate, and she is at 12. So this marker is basically to assess systemic inflammation in the body. And so the doctor's office is saying you can be 25 and be okay, but we actually want it to be below 10. So because she's at 12, it tells us that yes, there is some excess inflammation happening in the body. And so she is definitely not in an optimal state. So we need to address that inflammation. It could be being driven by the infection that we suspect. It could be the jab. It could be so many different things. But it's important to know that it's there, right? But then when we look at her other inflammation marker, the CRP, she's just fine. She's under 1. That's what we like to see. So she's got some inflammation happening, but it's not so acute that it's also affecting this marker. All right, and then she did a urinalysis as well. And we see that her color is normal, that's great, but her specific gravity is 1.005. That is the absolute bottom of the range that we like to see. And actually, because she's eating so much protein in her diet, I would definitely expect this value to be higher than it is. So this is again telling me that she is not absorbing a lot of the protein in her diet and that we need to add support in there. She also has a low pH or an acidic pH. We want this to be between 6.5 and 7.5, and she's at a 6.0. This indicates that there is excess acid in the body. Again, it could be because of the ammonia byproducts that pathogenic bacteria are producing. This is my highest suspicion, especially since she eats so well and has such a healthy lifestyle. Then we have a bunch of normal values, and then down at the bottom here, we see epithelial cells in the urine, just a few, and we also see white blood cells in the urine. We saw a little bit of blood as well, but she mentioned that she was probably menstruating, so I'm not worried about that. But the epithelial and white blood cells indicate that she likely has a subclinical chronic infection happening. So we may need to think about addressing a UTI here. She was asymptomatic of having any UTI problems, so I'm not super worried about this, and especially since the nature of the things that we're going to add in will likely address any kind of microbial presence that isn't supposed to be there. I don't think that we'll need to add in anything super specific to this, but it's still good to know, right? It's part of the story. There are all of these different parts of her body chemistry that are telling us there's bacterial growth, there's bacterial presence that isn't supposed to be here, that is abnormal. And then just to hit it home, she also had bacteria in her urine as well, which indicates to us the same thing. So to sort of summarize, we basically found evidence in her blood work from March that she had some kind of acute bacterial infection. She had stress, she had some hyperadrenic markers, she had some liver markers that seemed stressed out. She's got a lot of acidity happening in her body, she's got inflammation, and she's also got a suboptimal thyroid that's happening. So when her doctor looked at that blood work, he shrugged at her and said, I can't point to anything in here that would indicate anything is wrong with you or would cause any of these symptoms. But I look at it and I think, well, if she has an acute infection, a low functioning thyroid, and adrenal stress, I think that could definitely help to explain some of those symptoms. So what my theory is, after looking at this, is that she likely had some kind of bacterial infection that was already present in her body, maybe at a low level, before she got the jab, and that she was able to really manage this without any kind of targeted intervention, just using diet and lifestyle. Honestly, diet and lifestyle are so powerful, they can keep these things in check for years. But what we know is that really stressful events can lower the immune system temporarily and allow these things to get out of control and take hold. And that's what I think happened. I think that the jab was so stressful for her that it ended up collapsing her immune system for long enough to let this infection really begin to get out of control and start causing some heinous symptoms. Okay, so what did we do about it? Well, we started with 30 days of drainage. We do this with every single client. I love to use Cellcore's Phase 1. I think it has all the right ingredients to get most people back online and eliminating all of the waste in their body that their body needs to eliminate. We can't start killing stuff off before we are moving waste out of our body efficiently. Otherwise, we're just going to cause Herxheimer reactions, die-off reactions, make everything worse, right? So we got her on biotoxin binder. It's a formula that has fulvic and humic acids. These are super nourishing substances. They help to repair tissue, and they also glob onto a lot of the biotoxins that any pathogenic bacteria may be producing, and they help to escort them out of the body. We also added in CT minerals to help with her mineral balance. Remember, she had that high chloride value that would indicate she's got some mineral stress that is negatively impacting her adrenals. We also added in a really powerful digestive stimulant called TUDCA. It's a bile acid that really helps to stimulate powerful digestive fire, which she seemed to really need since she wasn't expressing that she was digesting all of the protein that she was eating. She also needed some immune modulation, so we switched her from regular coffee to King coffee. King coffee is from Organo. It is certified organic, mold-free, and it also contains powerful reishi mushroom spores. These spores are super, super powerful. They have a lot of literature behind them about their ability to modulate the immune system. And they're also slightly anti-parasitic and antimicrobial, so they'll gently begin to cleanse her body as well. So we got her onto King coffee. And then as needed to move her bowels, we want her to be moving her bowels 2 to 3 times a day just to really make sure that she's getting rid of everything she needs to get rid of. We put her on oxy powder, which is a form of magnesium that helps to hydrate the bowels. So she did 1 month of drainage, and then we moved on to parasite cleansing. So why do we need to parasite cleanse if her issue is pathogenic bacteria and Lyme? Well, Lyme and bacteria live inside of parasites. It has been shown in literature. And remember that her parasite marker was an absolute 0, which indicated to us that there may be biofilms present hiding the parasites. So we really need to look at parasites first to be absolutely sure that they're gone before we spend time addressing Lyme, because the Lyme will just come back if it's hiding in the parasites and we don't get rid of those first. And actually, some people who get rid of their parasites, they don't even end up needing to address their Lyme, because that was the safe house, that was the hotbed where the Lyme was thriving. Keep that in mind as we continue to go through this case study. Okay, so we did 30 days of drainage, 60 days of parasite cleansing, and we did add in some gentle Lyme support, just a very low dose to kind of help her body to get that toxicity bucket down. So for the next 60 days, we brought all the drainage support with us from phase 1. We added in Cellcore's parasite cleansing products, Para 1 and Para 2. And we also microdosed their Lyme product, the IS Bore. And then because she was showing some signs of liver stress, I also added in an additional liver and kidney support from Cellcore called KL support. So she did 60 days on this protocol. And then finally, she did 60 days of a deeper parasite cleanse. She actually began to report parasite symptoms after this initial 60-day parasite cleanse, which is so interesting considering what we were suspecting, that biofilm was preventing her immune system from seeing the parasites. And then we busted the biofilm and we started to address the parasites, and suddenly, you know, she was having anal itching, she was having some skin issues, and those are huge parasite indicators. So we started to do a deeper parasite cleansing, and we also began to push detox, because Lyme can live inside of parasites, but so can heavy metals, so can viruses, so can chemicals. So when you're killing these off, you need to be mopping up everything that they release while you're doing that. All right, so we brought drainage support along with us. We added in Cellcore's Para 3 product, which is a great all-around antimicrobial. It targets parasites, but it also targets pathogenic bacteria, so that was great here. And then we pair that with Lymph Active, because a lot of these microscopic parasites and Lyme bacteria love to hide in our lymph system. And so these two products work really synergistically together to make sure that you can really get deep into the body where it's hiding. We added in a new binder from Cellcore called Vired Chem, which is designed to bind up viruses, radiation, and chemicals. And then to begin to address that hyperacidity in her body, we had her start nebulizing with hydroxygen. Hydroxygen is just biomolecular oxygen. It's really gentle and really powerful, and can do a great job sort of cleaning the lungs, cleaning the sinuses, really delivering oxygen deep into the body. Okay, so these were our 5 months. We basically just did 30 days of drainage, 2 months of light parasite cleansing and Lyme, and 2 months of parasite cleansing and detox. And so by this time, this client was feeling so much better. In the beginning, as a reminder, she was dealing with numbness, dizziness, and exhaustion and brain fog. These things were preventing her from functioning in her life. She was afraid to drive. But at the end of 5 months, she was driving at night. She took a road trip, a 5-hour road trip to stay at her family cabin. She said her digestion was the best that it had ever been as an adult. And she reported that she felt about 80% better from when she had these symptoms come on after her jab that required her to seek medical attention. So 80% better just doing this 5-month protocol following our mitochondria mastery map. So let's look at the after blood work. Okay, so this was from July 2021. Again, this is the complete blood count with differential. So we remember from March that her white blood cells were elevated. It made us think, oh gosh, there's an acute infection happening here. Now they're actually at the very bottom of the range for what we like to see, but they're still in range. So they're at 5.5. So this is awesome. It's great to see such an elevated number come back down into range, even though it's on the outskirts. So one thing that we need to kind of consider here is, oosh, is this high number just transitioning to a low number, which can sometimes happen when your immune system burns out, your military gets depleted, right? But I'll show you in a minute why I think that that's not the case. I think that it's just kind of seesawing a little bit before it finds an equilibrium. But this is incredible. At the very least, we have transitioned her from being in an acute infection phase to being in a chronic infection phase, which is much preferable. We see that the red blood cells, which is a marker of stress, is still elevated. This is completely normal when your body is healing. I'm guessing that she's still gaining her footing after having been through so much stress over the past couple of months. And when we look at her differentials, this is why I don't think that she is dealing with a chronic infection, because her neutrophils and her lymphocytes are now completely normal. They're back in range. They're absolutely fine. And look what happens here to the eosinophils, which is, again, the parasite marker. Remember last time it was at 0, and we thought that maybe that was a biofilm indicator. Now it's at 1.5. So her immune system is picking up the eosinophils. It's picking up the parasites. It knows they're there, but it's still in range. So there's nothing indicating that she's dealing with any kind of parasitic infection, at least anymore, right? Her basophils are good. Her granulocytes are good. The only thing that's high, and this is so interesting because of how the body works, is her monocytes. And monocytes can actually increase either when they're about to surrender to something, which I don't think is the case based on her other markers, or when they are in the healing phase and they're actively fighting off whatever is left of the infection, right? So they kind of come late to the party and they either wave the white flag and surrender, or they sweep up the debris and allow the body to heal. So this is so cool to see this progression in her blood work, that everything is normal now except for the monocytes, which is completely expected. All right, so we see that her sodium is fine. Her chloride has come back into range. That's awesome. But now we see her potassium is wonky. And she had actually said that she was starting to experience some kind of strange heart symptoms. You know, she was so ecstatic that her cognition and her dizziness and all of that had really begun to clear up, but her chest was beginning to feel sort of hypertensive. And so this potassium marker actually gives us a lot of insight into that. So something is stressing her cardiovascular system here, and I'll talk about what we added in to try to address that. And then we see her CO2 level is still low. This can be a pretty stubborn marker. It's one of the last things to come up when you are kind of done healing. Again, this indicates excess acid. It indicates low oxygenation in your body. If this marker remains low after checking it again when we're sure the infections have been resolved, then I'm going to want to be thinking about checking for other reasons that might be being dragged down, things like mold, metals, or even lifestyle things like breath work and air quality. Okay, so her glucose is a little elevated here. It's at 108. But again, she was not fasting for this, and she did not come back with any other blood sugar category symptoms. It is a little high, so I'm thinking there might be a liver congestion issue happening there, but I'm not super worried about the blood sugar itself. And then when we look down at BUN, we see that it's still low, but it's come up 2 points, right? So this is her protein digestion indicator. So we added in the TUDCA, which is a really great digestive aid, and that's been helping her. It's been helping her a lot, but it's still not quite in the range that I want to see it. So we'll probably have to add in a little bit more digestive support, but this is great. We're getting somewhere, right? And then Down at the bottom here, we see eGFR, which we want to be above 90, and it is just below that. It's at 87, so there's just very mild kidney stress happening here, and I suspect that this is likely because of all of the supplements that she's taking and all of the detox that she's doing, that her kidneys are just a little bit stressed. So this is really just going to be as simple as making sure she's hydrating more, getting plenty of minerals, and we'll also add in some targeted kidney support. Because she was having some heart-like symptoms, they ran her magnesium, and indeed it was low, not by their standards, but by ours, we want it to be above 2.2. So this is definitely a big deal when it comes to those kinds of tachycardia types of symptoms she was complaining about. So I will definitely have her be starting on some kind of magnesium regimen. All right, and then because I had sort of mentioned to her that I had a sneaky suspicion that she was dealing with something like chronic Lyme, she actually mentioned this to her doctor and asked for a test, a Western Blot test for Lyme, and they ran it for her, which is actually pretty rare. Most doctors will just kind of laugh you out of the office, but they ran it for her, and of course it came back negative. But why then was she responding so well to all of the Lyme treatment? Remember, she was microdosing with a targeted Lyme formula, and it's allowed her to begin driving again and to get her cognition back, and her migrating joint pain is now in remission, right? So what's going on there? Well, there's actually a study that you can look up by Stricker, written in 2007, that shows that this test, the Western Blot Lyme test, brings back false negatives. How often? 56% of the time. That is over half of the tests that were run. So I have no idea why the conventional medical community keeps running this test when it's basically like complete chance, right? A 50-50 chance whether or not it will show up or not. So, you know, sometimes these can be useful if they actually come back positive because it's something you can point to get meaningful treatment. But most of the time, these are just a crock. So always remember not to take these too literally. And it just goes to show, given her symptoms and how well she did with everything that we put her through, you know, all of her symptoms were pointing to Lyme, that even if you don't actually end up having Lyme, if you have signs and symptoms that point to that, just treat yourself like you have Lyme. You don't even have to believe that you have it and feel better, right? Like, it doesn't matter at the end of the day. Okay? So, to sort of summarize, she improved in so many ways. We got her bacterial infection under control. We got her protein digestion vastly improved. And we got a lot of her adrenal stress to chill out. All right, so these are incredible wins. And most importantly, she felt better. You know, she still had some hypertensive symptoms, but those actually ended up resolving after we implemented the therapies that I'll talk about in just a second. But she was able to reclaim her life. You know, she could drive again, she could participate in life again. And that all started with looking at her blood work and following the Mitochondria Mastery Map. Okay, so what did we do next? What did we do after we got this awesome blood work back? We stayed on the drainage. Drainage is so important, you guys. Never underestimate the power of a good drainage protocol. Because her CO2 levels were sort of stubbornly low, which indicates excess acid in the body and low oxygenation, we added in breath work and mindset work, and we had her continue nebulizing with the hydroxygen. We added in inflamma control to just kind of clean things up and take care of those residual stress markers that were elevated. This is also a great cardiovascular formula and can definitely help with hypertension. We also are going to have her take internal hydroxygen. So you put hydroxygen in water and drink it. That's how most people take it. At this point, she has primed her body enough by nebulizing it to be able to consume it internally, and hopefully that will drive that formula deep into her tissue where it's needed. And then to alleviate the mild kidney stress and to add in additional protein digestion support, we got her onto CT-Zyme from Cellcore, which is a really powerful proteolytic enzyme blend. Getting her from feeling completely incapacitated and having no idea what was wrong with her body to being able to live life again and having a few residual concerns, but being able to drive, reclaiming her energy, being able to think straight. These things are invaluable, right? And it just took 5 months. 5 months and functional blood work. So such an important lesson to learn, my friends. When you don't know where to look at your blood. All right, guys, I hope that you enjoyed this blood work walkthrough with me and that your jaw is on the ground about the incredible results that we can see with this tool. If you are interested in getting your blood work assessed by trained eyes like mine, then you should go ahead and check out the link below where I will link to my Mitochondria Mastery program. It's my signature 12-week one-on-one program where we'll use functional blood work to determine your unique root cause. Not to mention, we've got a ton of great education modules. We've got a soul community. We help you with your mindset and emotional work. You're not going to want to miss it. So definitely, if this video has piqued your interest in any way, go ahead and click the link below to learn more. So thank you so much for walking through this case study with me, and I hope to see you in the program.